Oh, and welcome. I'm trying this thing out, seeing what this is like. And yeah, I hope it's fun. I'm streaming live right now, but I know nobody's watching because I didn't tell anybody to, and the odds of somebody randomly finding this are next to nil, but it's out there. So, also, I'm doing some crazy things on my internet right now, and I'm showing I've got lots of dropped frames, and I'm just not going to sweat that right now. It is what it is. I'm probably going to sweat very little at this. This is going to be very misproduced, unproduced, unfinished, unraw. It's going to be very raw. So, and that's kind of the point. I'm going to be jumping right in on a programming tasks or whatever I'm doing. I'm not really setting this up to be like a beginner tutorial. It's more about just what's going on. What's it like to be a programmer to some extent? What do programming tasks look like? Whatever things we deal with, what do they look like at some point in time? And maybe you're a beginner and you're wanting to understand it, and this really isn't the place to maybe say like learn hard facts. It's more about a context where this is where we end up, and this is where things are going, and we're going to tackle things together. Hopefully, as maybe more and more people get involved. So welcome, hello world. Kind of a familiar ring. So I'm kind of gearing this, just to say one more thing, kind of gearing this to people who are kind of programmers. They may be beginner programmers, they may be seasoned programmers and just want to hang out. So it's a programmer thing. And so sometimes I'll talk a little basic, assuming that maybe even not even everybody's a programmer that's reading, looking this, or seeing this, or watching this. That's we're just going to go over. We're just going to have topics. We're going to have life, and we'll see where it goes. So, hello world, your traditional. I'm starting to do things. How can I write my first program ever? That's not me. I just found that image. Not attempting to be me. I found the image, and it's what stuck first. Won't last. But anyway, so we're jumping right in. You might be lost. I'm not going to necessarily try to catch you up. I am going to try to be at least a little bit basic to pull you along if you're new to programming or you're not even a programmer. So I have all sorts of things planned, and maybe one day I'll organize it. Maybe there'll be different sessions, different episodes, and different series. But we're a long way off from that, and then right now we're just getting started. A lot of stuff we'll be covering are things like PHP programming. I use the Laravel framework when I do that. Those may not be words that make sense to you, and they may not make sense to you right away, but we'll keep digging into them. In fact, we'll talk a little bit about that more in this session. We're going to be doing some MySQL and MariaDB, which is basically the same thing. Database stuff. We're going to look at HeidiSQL is the tool I'm using right now. We're going to look at that. We're going to dig into that. We're going to run some things through that in our various talks. General web development. I'm I'm not necessarily the best when it comes to front end stuff, but we'll dabble in that a little bit. Raspberry Pi. I love playing with the Raspberry Pi. I've got one over here. Um, Let me see if I can get that pulled up. We'll see. Let's see if we get that pulled up. Web camera. Sorry, I'm still learning. There's my Raspberry Pi over there. You can see it hanging out. I usually do wired just because I can count on it, and sometimes I'm connecting to other things that aren't Wi-Fi, and it's just easier. So, sorry, this is real life. There's a lot going on. I have to pay attention to the phone in case I get things that I need to respond to. For instance, my wife's making the daily grocery store run, and I need to make sure something's on my list of things for her to get. Welcome to life, right? COVID-19 life, living it, loving it. Uh, Let me respond to this real quick, and done. Life. All right. So we got my Raspberry Pi over here. We'll turn that off. See some Blime code there in the background. That's PHP. Welcome to PHP if you've not seen it before. Also, we may get into some Unity game dev. Unity is a 3D engine for creating games. It's starting to be used for a whole lot of other things, which is exciting. I like it. I want to see it. And I'm really enjoying it. I'm just learning myself, but I'm really enjoying it. It's really going well. And maybe we'll just play some games sometimes. All right. So, I really love to find a way to like just smash this all together and throw it together. So like I'm really looking for opportunities to um, create a 3D game that interacts with the Raspberry Pi from a hardware lights perspective or something like that. Maybe even fire up Minecraft and see what we can get it to do to respond out. I'd love to, maybe I've got a buzzer that's a creepy crawly proximity alert or something like that. Some of those kinds of things would be fun. But the first project we're dabbling in is this thing that I'm calling the baseball time machine. It's a project that I started like 10 years ago, probably, maybe even more, where I got exposed to a website called retrosite.org. And let me just kind of pull that up real quick to give them a shout out. Retrosheet.org. And got to spell it right. That's one of the things about this is I found this being very raw, and some of that's because programming is about just like a good programmer isn't necessarily one who gets it right the first time. A good programmer is not someone who can write code from scratch and really crank it out. A good programmer also has to be able to deal with troubleshooting and issues. And in fact, the most productive programmers are those that can debug quickly, can fix and find problems quickly. And those are the ones that are in demand. Come up to speed on what's going on, understand what the problem is, and try to fix it quickly. So you're going to see me just deal with that. I'm a very iterative programmer. I'll do small changes and then I'll test them out and try to get them working. Small changes. We'll get into that just a little bit. But let me pull up RetroSheet just to kind of bounce you around in a little bit to give them a good shout out. Turn off Sublime. There's RetroSheet. So this is a website that's just done a ton of effort, gone through a ton of effort to pull together all the baseball data from all times. You can see I just had a list there of all the seasons, and here's the final standings, and I can go in to Cincinnati Reds, and I can look at their rosters that they used during that year. I can look at the game-by-game stuff, and see a box score and a play-by-play, and so forth and so forth. So we can see all that, and it's just kind of stunning how much they've done. Well, and they've also got this section where you can just download the files yourself. And they talk about their event files and the nomenclature they use and how they use it. Well, I've just been digging through it and myself and wanting to create a situation where my own project. And so what it does is and I'm revisiting. I started this a long time ago. I thought it'd be fun. Thought it'd be great. I really dug into it, and actually, I was able to contribute to RetroSheet's data because I was really digging into it at that level. But it finally, like most things I kind of do, died, and I kind of dig through that a little bit as we kind of go through today. But I started revisiting it a few weeks ago. I was like, I really want to get something out there in the world that I can contribute, and not that it's a big deal and can change the world, but that I can kind of have visible and out there that I can, talk to. And then this idea of this conversation came about. So I started kind of dabbling in it. And then when COVID-19's kind of hit and kind of come through, it's even more and more pertinent. And I thought, well, let's just get this rolling. So the basic idea is imagine ESPN back in 1962 as if the games were actually going on now. That's why it's a baseball time machine. So we've gone back in time. It's 1962 is my start. And it's May 8th of 1962. You would come to the website. You'd see the current standings, you'd see stat leaders, you'd be able to kind of watch the play-by-play of the games, almost like if you went to ESPN's baseball coverage during any season. Not so much say like the news and stuff, but just the stats and kind of play-by-plays and those kinds of things. So one of my many personal flaws is that I love to start very ambitious projects and then I really can't finish them. And that may be to some extent there's some flaw in that, and other things is I'm just really anxious to do some big things and pull together different things that I can do to accomplish something big. And the reality is life just doesn't afford it for me. So it's that tension and that struggle. So what I've decided to do is to tackle this, and usually when I do these ambitious projects, I tackle them much in the same way I would develop a project at work for developing. So it's really easy. It's really uh, normal to develop something and you're tackling the technical issues. You're laying the foundation first. You're kind of putting things forth. So, I can get 60, 70% done with something, and there's really very little visible progress. So, because I'm laying the groundwork, the framework, and tackling some of the big technical issues first. I mean, like, I pretty much went through data for 30, 40, maybe even as many as 50 years, close to it, of the baseball data I was going through and sifting through and digging out. So, but there's nothing really to show for it. So I decided that that's what I'm going to do this time. Everything I do is going to be geared towards visible progress as quick as possible. So the point being is, if there's a big thing that I want to do that doesn't have visible progress, it's going to have to wait until there's visible progress going on that I can show, that can be moving along and going, and then I add in these new features. So in about a weekend, I was actually able to get pretty much most of this stuff going without flaws, and it wasn't even like I was in here all the time, in my office all the time, but it's visible. And so we're going to walk through what I've got so far quickly, and we're going to dig into my first feature that we're going to try to add. So what I have is, I've shown you RetroSheet, and I'm realizing now that I don't think I have a source. I'm using OBS Studio. So basically you've been seeing a blank screen. So I'm still learning OBS Studio, and I'm using it, and I'm realizing I don't have a source set up to capture my Heidi SQL database management tool that I use. So MariaDB is a fork of a tool called MySQL, SQL structured query language, which is what's used to attack a database and to pull data up from it, et cetera, et cetera. Sorry, I'm kind of doing two things at once here, trying to talk and chew gum. And so now, hopefully, you are seeing over top of everything a Heidi SQL window with my head kind of stuck there in the corner. So let me get that a little bit. See if I can. Yeah, that's really not acting like I would like it to act. But this is what happens when you don't plan ahead and you don't test this little thing and something comes like this. So hopefully you can read that. I'll keep playing with it to see if I can get that a little bit better. I don't know why. So normally with this stuff, I don't know why there's all that blank space, but we'll try to make it a little bit bigger. All right, so I'm not sure what you're seeing. I'll have to look at the recording later to see. But we're going to be doing some stuff Heidi SQL. So MariaDB, basically the creators of MySQL, is an open source. It is still open source, community-driven database. Well, eventually it got bought, and some of the founders went off and kind of did their own thing called MariaDB. Maria is, I think, his wife or a daughter, and he also has a wife or daughter named Heidi. So now we have Heidi SQL as the tool. So we're going to be looking at data. There's a lot of data involved in this project. RetroSheet, we pulled the data in. I've started pulling in data. I've got games. I got a list of the games in 1962 right now. You can just see a bunch of data. Now, not all of this data is actually in, say, the RetroSheet files. I'm having to also kind of manipulate and manufacture it. For instance, I don't really actually know the start time of any of the games. I know whether they're a day or an evening game. So I've made the optimization that day games start at 1 o'clock and night games start at 7 o'clock. There's also a couple games, I think they're called evening, so they're going to start at 4 o'clock. I've also made the optimization that everything starts at the same time. It wouldn't be hard. In fact, I'm going to grab my notes and add that as a feature that I can add. I've got a little notebook here that I'm keeping track of feature, and that is time zone specific start times. So it wouldn't be hard to based on the home team's time zone, fluctuate that so that games are starting relative to the time zone in which they're actually being played in. And this actually brings me to kind of some of the parameters of the playback. So basically what I'm going to do is going to start at 1962, April 9th, 1 o'clock. It's the first game of the 1962 season between the Philadelphia Phillies and the Cincinnati Reds. Also ongoing at the same time is the Detroit Tigers versus the Washington Senators. So those two games will get us kicked off at 1 o'clock. Basically, the way the baseball time machine works is there's a server clock running, and this server clock is keeping track of the replay time. The replay time runs real time when a game is going on. So if a game's going on, 1 second equals 1 second. There's another time factor that comes into play, and that is during the season. So while a season is actually in the midst, we're not in January of a year. We're in, between April and October, November, depending on preseason. When we're in that period of time, but a game is not going on, right now the speed factor is going to be times 12. So a second equals 12 seconds. A minute equals a minute will be 12 minutes. An hour will be 12 hours. So we'll get through a day in about 2 hours if no games are going on. Of course, there's hardly ever any 24-hour period where there's no games going on. However, there's close to 21 right off the bat, as there's 1 o'clock game, 2 1 o'clock games on the 9th, and there's not more games until the 10th at 1 o'clock. So that's the time factor. So one of the things this project needs is a server that's always running, a process that's always running, maintaining our clock, right? What is the replay clock? It's been a second. How many seconds have transpired since the last second? That guy lives and is written in Visual Studio, and we'll take a look at that in just a second. The other thing that's also part of this is I'm going to go ahead and take a break and have no clock running, no time passing between 1 a.m. Eastern Time and 1 a.m. Eastern Time and 9 a.m. Eastern Time. This is just to make sure things aren't going on at night when nobody's watching anyway. It's kind of silly. It's not the point. So it's silly. So we're going to do that. And, this is actually one of the big optimizations I've made to make this thing up and running. The first time I did it, I spent a ton of effort trying to make it so that no game started and stopped in that window. So I was shuffling times and setting times, and boy, that was a lot of effort I put forth just to do that optimization so that no games were actually, like, the nighttime was in between games. And it stretched things out. It was real ugly. Now the clock just stops. If we're in the middle of a game, we're in the middle of a game. It'll start back up at 9 a.m. the next day. So that's got us up and running quicker. So also, the other thing I don't know, and we'll look at the game event file, the other thing I don't know is exactly when each little event happened. And in fact, I do have a little bit of balls and strikes data. You can see here I've got balls. Well, I didn't really want to click that. I've got balls and strikes data. I don't have a pitch sequence for a lot of, these are all blank for this game back in 1962. I just don't have a lot of that stuff. And so I don't really know how long each event took. So I built a formula that went through and calculated. I do know how long the whole game took. So I built a formula that went through every single game, determined how many inning changes there were, which right now an inning change will take 2 minutes. Is how long I'm going to pause for that. And then it also went through and counted what I'm calling mid-inning pitching changes. So team's batting, and in the middle of their bat, the team decides to change pitchers. And so there's another break of 2 minutes. So I calculate how long those are, and then that then leaves me a block of time and a number of events that have to take place. And so I just take the time, divide by number of events, and it gives me a factor that says each event should take about this long. I walk through all the events, and I kind of randomly add or minus from that. As the time gets off base, I weight it so that as the play goes on, it slowly works its way back. And I think now I'm within 1% or 2 on every single game of how long it actually took to how long my game is set up. And you can see I've got in the event file a manufactured date time that I'm saying the event took place. Okay. So again, we're going fast, but just trying to set things up and get us to where. So I've got all the events of 1962. So for instance, I can see here, it's the first inning, the visiting team's batting. Oh yeah, it's gotten way out of order. My ID's gotten out of order because of the ball strike thing that I clicked on. It started doing some weird sorting. Anyway, you can see in this one, let's look at this row right here. It's the fifth inning. The home team's batting. There's no outs. This is the batter. I know a lot of players, but I don't know who. First name starts with M and Rainey. Nope. Got Don Larson on the mound, it looks like. Maybe if I knew the team that was playing. San Francisco is the visiting team. Houston's the home team. So Houston's batting. Boy, I might should know that one. So anyway, Don Larson's pitching. We've got Tom Hall catching. Orlando Cepeda at first. C. Hill. J. Dav. Jose Pagan at short. Willie McCovey in left. Willie Mays in center. And Felipe Alou in right. And the batter hit a home run. Nice job. He's a leadoff batter in the inning. Blah 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 blah. And we see with data after data after data after data after data about what happened on this play. And eventually you get to the end where I've manufactured somebody named Renew homered. I've looked at the data and I've created a little textual description of what happened in that data. All right? And so that's our data file for event. And we're going to look at data. We're going to have to dig into data and make this thing happen. All right, so that went longer than I expected. But anyway, so we got a lot of data manipulation going on. We also do some data manipulation in Visual Studio. So let's pull up Visual Studio now. There's Visual Studio. Let's hide. And there's Visual Studio. So what do we got? We're looking at our time check. And what's our time check doing? This looks like code where I was playing with and trying to manipulate times just a little bit to determine. Oh yeah, I was just trying to check how long does a season take. So when do I have breaks and when do I have time, and let's move along times and do a little check. You can see, we'll glance at some code here. This is set event time. This is where I go through and I pull up a game, determine, look at all the game events, determine how much time's left in the game. If there's different time left in the game, then I got to figure out what I got to do to, am I in the midst of a mid-inning pitching change, blah, 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 blah. So I figure out a bunch of time and do a bunch of time. The more interesting code that we're going to fire up at least some point today, at least I think it's interesting, is this is the server code that's going to start the process of keeping our replay clock. So we can see in season off games speed is 12. That's where I said it's 12 times as fast. We're doing a season replay, and what we're going to do is we're going to start some threads that ultimately, here's the background loop that kicks off this background loop here, that all it's doing is looping our clock. So make sure we've got the current time. Are we in the midst of a game? If so, then we're just going to, we keep track of the last clock time, blah, blah, blah. And either way, we're basically trying to determine how long it's been since we last looked at time, and based on that, that's how much time we add. So if we're not calling it every second, if we're calling it every 10 seconds, and it's been 10 seconds since we last called it, we need to add 10 seconds. And that's our delta t. If the last time we called it was 10 seconds ago and we're off season, we're going to add 120 seconds to our replay time. We're going to set the replay time, save the replay time, a little bit of debug code, set a label on the screen, and we're off running. So that's what this loop's doing. Looping, 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 every so often running, running to update our season clock. So we're going to look at some Visual Studio code here and there. We also have a website that I utilize a tool called programming language is PHP. I use a framework called Laravel, which does a whole lot of stuff that helps out PHP web developers. And we'll get into some of that. I use the Sublime Text Editor tool as the tool in which I develop in. And that's what you're looking at now on the screen behind here. And we're looking at what's called an AJAX request controller. And that's something we're going to dig in today because I want to create an AJAX. It's basically a way to refresh the screen without refreshing the whole screen. So refresh parts of the screen, get some new data back from the server to do something different to the screen without having to go all the way back and forth. All right. So then we also see that we're, what are two main things that I wanted to get up and running to get this thing with some visual product? Well, one, I need to be able to show the clock. What time is it now? And two, I need to be able to show games that are going on. And right now, it's just a fairly simple box score showing you where it is in the game, much like what you would see if you were at a ballpark and you were looking at all the other games that are going on. So let's see, we can pull that up now. When I open up my browser and close the retro sheet, let's refresh this because I've reset the time since then. And there we go. So what you're seeing is I refreshed the time to start. We're April 9th, 1962. It's 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And we have two games that are about ready to start. Detroit with Don Mossy on the mound, Washington Senators with Benny Daniels on the mound, Philadelphia versus Cincinnati, which features Art Mahaffey versus Joel Jay. So those games are all set to start. And as soon as I start my clock, we'll start seeing changes happening to these files. And they're going to have line scores, as you kind of barely saw on the screen before it first came up. There was line scores and data going on like the game was in progress because I was doing some testing earlier. Let me look at my notes, make sure. I'm not planning this out in advance, but I am trying to script it a little bit. So we're going to see. So there's lots of things that I can, work on as some future episodes. One, there's a semicolon that I put at the end of each event because as I'm kind of walking through the event, I want to make sure I knew when the event ended and was done. And I left them in there, and it looks kind of ugly on the screen. There's some spacing issues when the games are going on that need to, I'd like to deal with. We talked about the time zone thing. I'm also making a note here because I haven't written it down yet, and I want to write it down. I don't really deal with extra innings well at all. What it looks like when a game goes past 9 innings, and so that's something we'll have to tackle and go through. But the one I want to tackle today, the first one that I thought I was going to tackle so I've got another issue that says when upcoming games are going on, like when a game's going on, I only show games that are going on. When there's no games going on, then I've got a system for showing upcoming games. The problem is there's a time period where there's games going on, but it'd be nice to know what's coming up in the future. It's a 1 o'clock, and I'd like to know that there's a 7 o'clock game that night. Or one of the things I really realized, and I can kind of show it here in a second, is I didn't realize this when I kind of said, well, I'll worry about that later, is there's this brief period where, like for instance, the games that we have going on now, so it's almost 1 o'clock. So once this clock starts, in fact, I can go ahead and get this state going by figuring out, I'll write a query over here. We'll look at this. Well, that's good. This query right here will be just fine. This shows me, so we'll do a little bit of a SQL primer. So I've written a query here to get some data. So select every field from the table, game events, and just order it by the event date time, which is the manufactured time that I set to show this event. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this time that this first event happened, and I'm going to put it as in the database as the current time. I'm going to add 4 seconds so that way I know for sure that event happened. And what's going to happen is, so again, remember, I've got this bug where it's now a bug. Before it was kind of like, I thought it was just kind of a state, but there's definitely a bug here because when games are going on, I only show games that are going on. When no games are going on, I have a formula that shows past games for a little while and then upcoming games for a little while. The problem is there's a period of time now where as soon as games start, some games will look like they're in progress. Some 1 o'clock games will look like they're in progress because they've had events. And some games will look like upcoming games because they haven't had their event yet. So when I refresh the screen, what's going to happen is the Philadelphia-Cincinnati game has had an event, but the Detroit-Washington game has not had an event. So it's going to disappear. So we're going to see that. And you see our clock moves a little bit, and that's the state we get. We get Taylor walked for Philadelphia, walked in the top of the first to lead off the game. But where did our Washington Center scheme? Well, it's not in progress right now. It's an upcoming game. So since the game's in progress, I don't show upcoming games. So that's a bug we gotta fix. Don't know exactly how we'll fix it just yet, but I've got some ideas good enough. We'll work it out. It'll be good. But as soon as I get to this, as soon as I push that ahead, let's go ahead and just push my time ahead. You know what I probably did bad there is I think I talked through something that you couldn't see. I did, didn't I? See, I'm still learning. Let's go back and let's show you what I did there in Heidi SQL. Let's pull up Heidi SQL. So what I did in Heidi SQL is I have a query written that says that I talked through. Select everything, all the fields from game events and order them by the event time. So I'm really hoping you guys are seeing that now. Yeah, you are. And when I run that, it had already run. It takes just a little bit, and there it is. And what we should see here is the very first event in time is that walk. I can kind of see over here this batter, Tony Taylor batted. And if we scrolled over, we'd see that he walked. And so what I did is I graphed this time that event happened. I went back over to my season replay data and I popped that in there. Well, what I've done now is I've rolled that ahead another minute, which should now, another minute later, should get us this event, this Detroit versus Washington Senators event, where I think he's Jerry Wood is batting. So what I should see, if I actually let you see it, come back over to my Chrome window and I refresh the screen, and now we get it. One of the things you'll notice is, and what we're going to tackle today is I've got a clock, I've got games, but did you notice that every time I hit F5, the clock starts at noon, everything kind of refreshes. Well, and then it just sits there. You could sit here for 10 minutes and not change, even though there's events going on. We don't really want that. I'd really like people just to be able to set it on the screen and just have it just keep going. And that's where something called Ajax steps in. Asynchronous, JavaScript, blah, blah, blah. And, I think it's Java asynchronous. I don't know. Anyway, too many A's, too many X's, transaction, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, it stands for the idea that behind the scenes, a process goes out to the server, grabs data, and manipulates the HTML, what the browser's seeing, without having to do a full refresh. So what I'm going to work on today, I think that's, let me see. Yeah, we're going to work on that today. So what we're going to do is we're going to make it so that this clock here, just the clock, periodically checks for a new time and moves the hands around so that the user doesn't have to leave the screen, hit F5, refresh the screen, however they do that, and the clock will still move. Now the games are going to be static because we haven't done that yet, but we'll do that later. So what we're going to do to get this working, what are we going to do? I've got some notes here that I said at least the order I was going to go. All right, so let's take a look at the Sublime code to see how the clock gets its code in the first place. So we'll pull up our Sublime, and if you're not familiar with Laravel, it uses a tool called Blade to build views. So Laravel uses a programming concept called Model View Controller, and this is something that I highly recommend getting used to if you're getting into the program, because it really simplifies the way you think through how things work. So model is, in essence, the data. So you have an object, some kind of data object that describes a model. For instance, in my case, I have models called game. A game represents a database table that describes a game. I have game event model, which is an event that happens in a game. I have a game log event, which has details about what happened in the game. The game is more that it occurred and when it fits in the schedule. The game log says what happens. I've started a player model, which tells me a little bit about a player. Each season has a replay, and then we have teams. And these are models that represent data, structures that represent data within our app. Then what we do is a model needs to be controlled. And so each model kind of has a controller, and then there's other controllers. And a controller is kind of where our logic fits. And so we have data, we have logic, and then the next thing we do is we need to show it. So then we build views. And so we take data, we run them through a controller, and we have views. The view makes a request to a controller who works with objects to generate views. Okay? You see how that kind of start to work out? And one of the other things that's important to note in Laravel is the idea of routes. And basically, so whenever you go to a web page, depending on how much you know about, let's pull up my Chrome again, how much you know about how web structures work, et cetera, is, so we have a website, and this would be, since I'm testing, it's localhost :8000, but this would be, www.baseballtimemachine.com. And if I go to, say, retrosheet.org, you can see I'm at a web page. And then eventually, as I go through different links, I start adding directories and files on the end of this box set C 1962, year 1962. And we start seeing things added and added and added. Well, lots of times with websites, that represents a physical structure. So if you physically went on this website, and it probably does for this because they probably pre-generate all their HTML, have it just sitting out there in flat files that are cached and referenced as needed. So you could go out there into a physical file and see this exists. There's a file that has this HTML in it, right? Click page source, which you may, yeah. And there's a file out there on their server that looks just like this. However, with Laravel, the way it works is you actually, everything goes to the main page in essence, but then based on routes, that request gets routed to certain sections of code. So for instance, what you're seeing in this route is if someone comes to this page, comes to the root of the website, what I want to do is handle that through the season replay controller show home page. And this is my home page route. Okay? So now anytime anybody comes to the home page route, this is what code gets called. So let's go look at that code. That code, show home page, has, here's what we're doing. We're going to go through this real quick because this is all going to be fine for this session. We go get our our number one season replay. There's only one right now, so I can kind of hard code some of this. I'm going to hard code things as I can right now. Just remember, visible progress. We're not going to think, oh, in the future I'm going to have 15 different season replays going on at the same time, one of each year, blah, 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 blah. No, this is showing one season replay. I'm going to go get the dashboard for all the National League games. That's what this code is here. Going out and grabbing all the data I need to show a dashboard view of a game in progress in the National League. And American League, all their games. That's all the in progress games. If it turns out that I do have National League games, then I'm going to start kind of manipulate some of the information to try to prep it for the line score, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Same thing for the American League games. If I don't have either games, then I'm going to go out and get, this is where I go out and get some in progress games based on some criteria. Upcoming games. Technically, these could be past games or upcoming games, depending on various rules in the statement. And then I'm going to, again, remember, we've got models. There's models going on in here. For instance, there's a model. Season replay is a model. And then there's also these models that I'm dynamically building called game dashboards. And then I'm going to take my season replay model, my dashboard National League, my dashboard American League models, and the controller has built these models, and now it's going to pass them to a view. So now let's go look at that view. Resources, views, home. This is my home page view. And you can see this is where we put the title of the website. And here's the clock HTML that starts to manage the clock. You can kind of see it's starting to show the month, the day, the year's hard-coded. Excuse me. American National, and this is our home view. And then we got down here, how many games we got? Okay, well then I need to pass those off to this include is another view just specifically for games, because I don't want to just have those sitting there. They're going to loop through for each game in the American League. Show this, and for each game in the National League, show this. This is some JavaScript that runs at the end of the code. This does two things. One, each game creates a way to communicate back to the script which inning is ongoing, and it turns those yellow here at the end. It turns them all yellow, and right here, lo and behold, this is what we were trying to come for. This is how the clock knows what time to show. It goes gets the hour from the season replay, sets that to a variable. It goes gets the minute for the season replay, sets that to a variable, and passes it off to a function called show hour and minute, show time. We're not going to go look at that code right now. That's beyond the scope here, but it's some code I found basically for a clock. I manipulated it slightly, and now we got it. Beg, borrow, steal. That's kind of how programmers work. So then, so what we're going to do is this is the first step. How long have we been? I was going to try to keep this first one to an hour. Probably in the future it'll be shorter, but keep closer to more like 30, 45 minutes. But this one would be about an hour with all the setup. So this is where we get our show time. So what we're going to want to do is every so often, we'll say this kind of in English. Let me make sure I'm showing you this code. Yeah, I'm not, am I? Good grief. I just walked through all that and you were staring at RetroSheet. I am so sorry. Blah, 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 blah. Boy, going to have to cut that out when I do the recording. Don't want to run through it all over again. Yeah, let's run through it real quick. Good grief. That's frustrating. Learning the tool. Sorry about that. So, yeah, let's run through it real quick. Hopefully you heard that, even though you're staring at RetroSheet. So let's look. Here's our, remember I mentioned routes. Routes, this is the route. Route says, when I go to the web page, when I go to this page, the root of the website, this is the controller I want to use, and this is the function in that controller that I want you to call. So let's go look at that. All right, this is where in season replay controller. This is the function show web homepage, and this is where it goes out and gets the season replay that I talked about. Here's the SQL for getting dashboards. What to do if I found a National League game, a little bit of manipulation there. I found out do I have American League games? Okay, here's what I need to do there. I don't have either, so I need to go get either upcoming or past games and show those. And then I'm going to take my models, my season replay model, my game dashboard National League, my game dashboard American League model, and I'm going to pass those to a view called home. So we go to views, we go to home, and this is the code. This is the HTML code that's going to start to be rendered when that view home. And we're going to marry that view home to some data. You see here, I'm starting to call my model now to go get the replay time and show the month, get the replay time and show the day. All right. And this is all code that'd be really easy to do like I did get hour and get minute. I probably should create a get month, get date to just really simplify this code. I shouldn't have to remember. In fact, I'm always having to go look that back up again whenever I need to write it. Much better would be as we come down here to the clock code that I wanted to show you, and we have an hour, get the hour, get the minute. I should have a get month, get day, get year. I should build all those real quickly and it won't take long at all. But anyway, get hour, put it in this variable. Get minute, put in this variable. Call show time, which is some JavaScript. This is all JavaScript code. I was using jQuery to kind of get things rolling, and some JavaScript code. All right. Good googly goo. Now you've seen it quicker. You heard it while you were looking at 1962 RetroSheet page. Whatever. Okay, back to notes. All right, so what we're going to want to do this is we're going to, every so often, we're going to want to call behind the scenes a special page to go and get the new hour and time and feed that back into our show time function. So just like this, when the page first loads, it goes out and gets the hour, the minute, and passes it to the function. We want to reproduce these 3 steps, in essence, every so often. So what does an every so often look like? Well, there's a nice little function in jQuery, in JavaScript called set interval. And what you're going to find is I work in several different languages. I'm always trying to remember how to do things, and a good programmer is one that can Google well. So let's go ahead and let's just go through this step. I think I could probably manage my way through a set interval call, but let's go see what it's like to Google for different things. So I'm going to do JavaScript set interval. W3 schools, you get references from that. They're usually very, very helpful. Very, very helpful. And so you can see even there's set timeout and set interval, which is a couple ways that you could pull this off. I'm just going to do set interval. Take a look at that. And basically what it says is the way this code works is you call set interval, you pass it a function. You can either write it in line like this is, or just give the name, and then how long, probably in milliseconds. Yep, in milliseconds. So 1,000 milliseconds equals a second. So we can see some other function parameters. We could pass it parameters. We'll get into that later, what that is. And it can actually, have an ID. So that way you could clear the interval if you wanted to. So here's an example. So basically, we'll walk through what this example does. It basically says, I'm going to set an interval that calls the function alert func every 3 seconds. And alert func, all it does is pop a message that says hello. So every 3 seconds it would pop up and say hello, and I'd go okay. Hello, and I'd go okay. So we don't want to do any of that. What we want to do, remember to turn on Sublime first so you can see what we're doing. Novel. We're going to, once our Java code is kind of all started getting set up, we're going to call set interval. I don't care to turn it off later, so I don't need to return. We're going to call update clock every, how often should we do it? Well, I'm probably going to change it to about 15 seconds, 10, 15 seconds. But for now, so we can really see some activity, let's just call that bad boy every second. Then let's create our update clock. We don't need to pass it anything. And what are we going to do here? Well, let's not try to do everything at once. Let's try to make this very iterative. So can I actually make this update clock do something every 1,000 seconds? Sorry, every 1,000 milliseconds, so every second. So why don't we just pretend like every second is a minute? So we're going to increment our minute by 1 every second. Sound good? That'll make the clock really zoom if this works right. So this is a statement that says whatever minute was, add 1 to it. That's what that code does. It could look like this. Whatever minute was, add 1 to it and set minute back to that. But we're just going to set this. This is a shortcut for that. And then we can just call our show time again. Right? Seems reasonable enough. So what we've added here is every second call this set of code, and that set of code is going to pretend like it's been a minute and update the clock. Let's see what that does. And this is where 2 screens would help me, and I probably can even get some hotkeys going and learn how to do this. Welcome to me learning while you're learning while I'm talking 49 minutes into it, and maybe I'll get some of it right. So let's see what happens when we try this. We're hoping that the clock starts zooming around every second like it's a minute. Let's see. Look at that. Wow, love it when a plan comes together right out of the bat. That doesn't always happen. Sometimes we have bugs and we go track it down. But anyway, that's a nice little look, isn't it? I'm sure hoping you're seeing this. Looks like maybe you are. All right. So we've accomplished that. So now then, but that's not real helpful. First off, the game's not really the server clock's not really moving that fast. Eventually we'll get the games to update down the bottom, but the servers, that's not showing me the real time. So now we want to show how do we go out and get the real time. Well, you might be tempted to say, well, we'll just do get hour again. But what's hard to see in this, and this is some, whoa, you can't see it. Let's switch back to Sublime. You might be tempted, well, what if I just did these two lines again here like this? What if I did that? Well, what? That's interesting. This is where JavaScript's just a little bit crazy for me. Every once in a while it gets happy for you. See it? Let me get away with not having a semicolon at the end of that. It figured it out for me. I don't like languages that do that. So we could, wow, why can't we do this? Well, the issue is this is a blade file. And what you're seeing with these, anywhere you see these squiggly brackets, that means this is where it gets a little confusing in that JavaScript here is built to run on the client once it's pulled down. So in other words, everything that happens in here, I take that back. The goal of JavaScript is to push down some code that can run on their side of the thing. So we're looking at server code now. This is server code now, and that's building client code that'll run on their side. This is a little bit of a complex thing to get the first time through, and always makes the mind kind of swirl a little bit. So we're writing some code that once it gets down to their side, so in other words, we have a server that's taking a request. Once it gets down to the client side, it's going to run. So this code's going to run on their side. Well, whenever you see these squiggly brackets, what that means is replace this whole section with something before it goes down to the client. So in other words, when it goes down to the client, none of this is what's going to be seen. Instead, it's going to completely replace it by what's returned by this get hour code. So if I were to do this right now, the request goes to the server fills in this replacement, and it then goes down to the browser, never to be updated again because we're not making another trip to the server. Okay, so I can kind of show you that a little bit. Look at this code here above this show time here, and then if I turn on the Chrome again and we view the page source, scroll down to the bottom where that script is, you can see it's filled in with the numbers. So it was 1 o'clock 2 minutes after 1 when in the replay when I ran this code. All that squiggly bracket, all that code's gone. None of that's there. So if I did the same thing down below, it would just say 1, 2, and it'd just be going 1, 2, 1 hour, 2 minutes, 1 hour, 2 minutes, 1 hour, 2 minutes. So we can't do that. But in essence, that's what we're going to do. We just have to make the round trip again. All right? So when we call the update clock, we're going to ultimately call an AJAX call. And this is something that I haven't done in a while. We're going to make an AJAX call. And so I'm going to need a lot of help. I'm going to need to do a lot of research on that. I've done some of it. That's one of the things I will do sometimes ahead of time. But what we're going to need first is we're going to have to create our request that gets this. So we need to create a route. Hopefully you're looking at Sublime. Yep. So we're going to create our first AJAX route. So route. We're going to make this a get because we don't need to. We could make it a post, which means if they're sending me data, then I need to handle it this way. And I'm just going to say AJAX request / current time. If someone tries to go to that, then what I want to call is my Ajax request controller at Ajax request. Went to the wrong place. Ajax request. And I need to pass it some data, and that's something that stink. I didn't take notes on how to do that right. And I've got, this is where it's like, oh, stink, I've done this before. But I haven't done this before on the machine that I'm working on right now. So what you're gonna see is, this is where, boy, I've done this. So what I wanna do is, what I'm trying to do is make it so that I don't have to, so to some extent, I want it to say something like this. So that whenever someone comes to current time, it calls current time, it calls this over here, passes in current time into this, and then I can build a case statement that says anytime current underscore time comes in as a request type, then build the result. Boy, I have trouble typing. All right, we can have some code that looks a little bit like this, right? But the reality is I know in the back of my head is, but I shouldn't have to build this every time to do these two things. What I really should do is do this right here. Yeah, something like that. All right, so what you can't see, you may be able to see my arm. I'm gonna pull up some code because I know I've done this before. Gonna take a look at another place. Yeah, interesting. All right, so it becomes real simple. Nice. I thought it was. This is what's so great about Laravel. If I just say squiggly $, no, where'd it go? Nope. Request underscore type. I don't need that. If I just do this, basically what Laravel does for me is whatever comes after that slash in their request that comes to, actually will put it into that variable. So see that this matches what I put here. Laravel handles all that. You don't know how wonderful that is and how helpful that is. That's a feature that exists, and how much code that's been written over the time to kind of do that. So again, in my desire to speed things along to get some visible results, even when I know I'm going to have to change them later, what I'm going to do is hard code a new time. And we'll see if first should load 2 minutes after 1, then a little bit time later it'll refresh to this new time that we're going to hard code. And so I do that. Boy, I sure hope you're seeing all this. Yeah, I do that by building an array and passing it in hour equals, let's just change that to 1, and minute equals 30. All right. So we're just going to hard code. Whenever somebody requests what the current time is, we're going to tell them it's 1:30. All right. And then this code basically turns this into a response. JSON is something JavaScript object notation. JavaScript is a kind of a language that takes objects, data objects, or data that you want to pass back to, turns it into a format that's able to be read programmatically in JavaScript quite easily. All right, so let's save this. Let's go back to our home. And this is where you need to build a nice big Ajax call to basically go get that, right? And to go get that. So what we're going to do is utilize $ dot. We're going to utilize jQuery to make an AJAX call. And there's our AJAX call. There's our AJAX call. And then, well, what are we going to do when we make this AJAX call? So we're going to put that inside these guys. Let's clean that up. I don't need those all to be on different lines. Blah, 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 blah. All right. So what can we do in this AJAX call? It's going to take lots of different parameters and do different things. So what we're first going to do is tell it where to go. We need a URL to go to. This URL, good news is it's right on our web page, right on our current site. And if we look at our route, we can just, we know that here's where we want it to go. We want it to go here. Current underscore time is what we want it to pass in. Okay? So that's where it's going to go. That's where this code is going to go off. This could be a whole nother web page that it gets data from, by the way. URL, it's going to be a get. We're not passing it any data. We're not trying to restrict. Maybe if I would want to go get a certain year, I want to tell it, give me the current time for this year, this replay. And this is where it gets fun. Success. What are we going to do when it comes, if this call is successful, right? We're going to call a function. We're going to pass it in the data that comes back. All right. And what are we going to do with that data? All right. So, one of the main things we're going to do with that data is this. We're going to do our show time now. If we get data back from this call, we'll show the new time we got. But I got to pull it out of data. And the way we do that is, you see me looking now because, again, it's been a while since I've done that. And it turns out I didn't grab that exact nomenclature. So over my head here, I'm looking at some other websites that I've built because I'm having a hard time remembering how to reference the data object. That's what I thought. All right. Again, I can probably act, because this is where JavaScript gets, let me see. I don't even have to. Yeah. This is where so many things have been written for me in advance that I don't even need to do, that it's really hard to remember. So that's basically it. I got to spell current right. So basically what's going to have to happen here is, every second, that's going to be too fast since we're actually calling. Let's go ahead and, let's go ahead so we can see the difference. Let's go ahead and change that to 5 seconds. Let's wait 5 seconds before we call this once. 5 seconds after the page loads, it's going to call this. That's going to get, boy, sure beard, look at this. That's going to get caught by this route here, which basically is going to call AJAX request controller, this function in there, and pass it in whatever they put in here as request type. You can see I put in current time into that field. So I go look at my AJAX request. It's going to say, what request type did they put in? Based on that, run this code. So this is going to build a result that just passes back an object that says the hour's 1, the minute's 30. See this hour, minute here? It's going to turn that into JSON. Well, what this AJAX call is going to do is, when that data comes back, it's going to put that data, it's going to put this result as JSON here. And we know this to be a JSON object, AJAX JSON, blah, blah, blah. So I can just say .hour, .minute, which corresponds to hour, minute, right? All right, ideally. So what do I expect to see? 5 seconds into the page, 5 seconds after the page loads, the clock will change to 1:30. That's what we hope to see with this one. This is some incrementive programming, right? Because we still got that old code running. It now thinks it's 4 o'clock. All right, so let's run again. No, errors. Ah, that's good. Nice to see errors. So this is an AJAX. We got some kind of syntax error. expected. Where's it at? It's in my routes. It doesn't like my route here. What don't you like about my route? That's not very neighborly. What did I do wrong? It got to the end of something, and when it was expecting of that. All right, so let's see. Let's go look at my route. Yeah, route, get. Oh, look at that. And even my color coding helps me here. See how that's yellow and that's white? It's because I didn't close off the string right here. Simple little problem. So far, let's see. Oh, wait, you didn't see that. Let me put it back. Let me put it back. Don't fix the problem if you're not going to show it to them. Learn the tools. All right, so we see we're looking at the route here, and look, notice how this is yellow and this is white. It's because we haven't bounced. Yellow is what's in between these little strings here. Got to put that in there. I got to purchase that one day. So great. That should do it. I think that's it. Let's see. Hopefully that's it. This is what an error looks like in Laravel. This is Laravel that's done this, not PHP. Laravel's really helped us try to understand what's going on, and it was very helpful. As you can see, it came down and told us pretty much what line the problem was. And even right here, I probably should have seen that was missing. So let's refresh this. Again, 5 seconds after the page loads, we expect the time to change to 1:30. Ta-da! And it did. So now we know. Let's go back to our Sublime. We're now over an hour, so we're getting really close. So now we know that if instead, right here, we actually got the replace time and minute, then it would work. How do we do that? Well, no reason to rewrite that code, right? No reason to rewrite much of that code, because we know that in our season replay, although I could, it's pretty easy. In our season replay, we went out and got the replay. Boom. Copy. Paste. Go get the current replay. And then the hour is now going to be season replay, get hour. And season replay, get minute. All right. And then let's decide how long we really want this to run. Let's go ahead and just for the sake of hours, it's going to be really hard to see this now I think about it. We're going to have to wait like a minute to see something happen. But, oh well, I'll find something else to talk about. But let's check every 10 seconds. All right. And then we'll kind of talk about things while we're watching this kind of take place. Because, oh, the other thing I need to do is I need to actually get the clock changing. Well, that's how we'll see it change. We'll speed that up. We'll actually just go ahead and change the data ourselves. So every 10 seconds, we'll check. So what we should see, if we switch over to Chrome now, first off, we should see that every 5 seconds, it doesn't change to 1:30. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So it hasn't changed. But what I should be able to do is probably even by the time I can get back, it'll have changed. I should be able to come over to the data and manually change in the database what the season thinks the time is. Commit that. Oh, I beat it. See, and there it goes. It took it a little bit of time. It went and checked. Notice I didn't refresh. Maybe you didn't notice, and you probably didn't see. Oh, you saw, but you didn't see me change the data. I went into the database, I changed the time, and then boom, it moved. Within 10 seconds after me changing the data. I'll show you that again. ID SQL. It's now 1:22. And we switch to Chrome. And it's 1:22. Okay. And then what we'll see is, let's go ahead and reset as we wrap up for today, sorry this has been a little long. I don't anticipate them being that long, but we've added some functionality to this. It's quite cool. And we'll talk through it a little bit, what we've done. So what I'm doing now is I'm going to Heidi SQL, resetting to where the season starts. We're going to start our season now. It's 1 o'clock. Go back to Chrome, see that state. This is what it looks like when the season starts. Now we're also going to go, we haven't looked at the Visual Basic Code at all. Let's just glance at that. Oh, yes, we did, didn't we? I don't know if you saw it or not. Who knows at this point? We're going to go into our Visual Basic Code. We're going to make sure this block of code is set to run. Yep, when the program runs, this code will run. And what we're going to do is we're going to start our server. And what the server is doing is just updating our time, keeping track of what time the time should be. And what we should see is go. Hopefully you're seeing, you know what, you might not be seeing. Let's go look and see if I can tell what you're seeing. You're not seeing this screen. Let's go ahead and window capture this screen. Yeah. All right. So that screen that you're seeing now is the server running, keeping track of what time it should be. Okay? So that is the code that's this Visual Studio project that's running in the background there that you saw run. I hit run. It's now running. You can kind of see some server stats, some execution stats happening over here. And you can see that the clock's changing. That's what time it is. And if I go back over to Chrome quickly, you'll see it hasn't updated anything. I'll refresh the screen. We haven't bounced back out of the server because it still thinks it's 1 minute. Because it practically is. It hasn't gotten the word yet that it's moved up in time. There we go. Did you see it? It decided to show the 1 minute time. It moved to 1 minute. Now nothing's happened in the game. We don't have that code automatically refreshing. But in just a second, we're going to see that change to, and there we go. Now the Philadelphia-Cincinnati game has started. I'm looking at the server clock up here, but you can't see. I've got it on my screen, and in a little bit, I can tell you. So if I do a refresh now, it should still be 1 minute after the clock, 1:01. But we probably will get the new American League game event. Yep. And we're coming up on 1:02. So if you watch the clock closely there in the middle of your screen, we should see it move here in the next few seconds. It's now 2 o'clock. We got to wait for our 10-second interval. Any time now, it should move by 1 more minute. And there it went. Okay? So there's our real-time clock moving. We've done what we wanted to do. The screen didn't refresh. Again, this isn't the wow kind of website that you would dream about, because remember, we're now acting in game time, real time, and more specifically, real-time baseball time, which is not very fast, especially given the fact that we're not seeing every pitch. We're only seeing every event. So events are happening, probably a minute and a half, 2 minutes, minute 15, somewhere in that range, maybe around a minute apart. Okay, and we don't have it automated to where, Ajax. We don't have it Ajax. So I'm going to have to hit F5 in order to keep things moving along. Wood singled to left, and Callison grounded out second to first, and Taylor was moved to second on the ground out. Okay? Well, we started there when our clock again is now 1:03. So time's flying. So anyway, this has been my first session. I've learned a lot. I don't know if you have. I don't know if it's been entertaining at all. I don't think you saw that the whole time, did you? No, I turned it off. I don't know. No, you saw that the whole time. Okay, so you saw the server clock is blocking your view. Sorry about that. But anyway. Oh, actually, it wasn't updating, was it? Because I moved it. That's interesting. I thought it would move with it. It just wasn't. I don't know what's going on there. Still learning OBS. Anyway, we are at the 15-minute mark almost, and we're going to call it quits. I'll get better at this. I don't know if it's interesting or not, but it's out there. So maybe next time we'll get some of the game data to start moving without. We'll see if we can get the game data to move without having to refresh the screen. And then, like I said, we got lots of other interesting features to make and add to this. I'd really like to get a game detail screen soon. I'm trying to decide when to quote go live, and maybe that'll be a session where I fight to try to get this thing live. That'll be all new territory. I'm planning on trying Amazon Web Services to house this, which I've not done before. All right. I don't have a name for this. My name's Ken. Enjoyed spending time with you. Probably should have said that up front. Enjoyed spending time with you. Yeah. Thanks a lot. Have a great day.